question now is, how do you do market segmentation? And this is actually quite a fun process if you do it correctly. If you already have a technology and people are buying it and experiencing it, you can actually just go to them and say, what are you using it for? And that will start to give you input. If you have an idea, it's not as easy to do that. But really what we're going to do here is we're not going to be limited just by what's already being done. We're going to get the team together and we're going to think out of the box, what are all the different potential things? And no idea is too crazy. Brainstorming is a very good thing. The crazier idea, the better, because it opens the aperture. And so then you're going to systematically make a list or lay out all the different opportunities that you can think of. And it's interesting because in my company, some of the first ones that we thought were so obvious we're going to do this ends up being ones that we didn't do. It was some other idea that came up in brainstorming. But once we lay out what the different opportunities are, now that was just brainstorming in a room. They might not be good ideas. We have to go out, and the answer lies in doing primary customer research. So we're going to go out and talk to real customers to find out what their problems are, what they think of this idea. We have to understand their needs as well, because they're not going to be able to design the product for us. So doing primary observational market research is fundamental. My thesis at MIT was on this, and what I saw was that you have to have a good process, but it's not just the process that matters. It's actually walking in the customer's shoes and using good inquiry techniques, not advocating for your product, but understanding what they're about. You need to walk in the customer's shoes. You need to understand them rationally, of course, emotionally, and also socially. What drives them? What do they kind of fear most in the world? But now we're going to understand their job as well by watching them, and this is what we call primary customer research. Then we're going to narrow down these markets. So we might have 20, and we're going to do a first pass on market research, and then we're going to say, all right, we can't do 20, we can only do 6 to 8 of them. And then once we do that, we've narrowed the field, and then we do another push of market research, primary market research, to do this. Do not trust, what you just see on the internet. Do not trust, a report from a group as reputable as Gartner might be. Go out and see for yourself, because the answer lies with the customer. You have to do this yourself. Don't download your eyes and ears. This primary market research is one of the most fundamental and important things that you're going to do. Now let's talk about step number 2, selecting a beachhead market. What is the step about? Step number 2 is about taking one of the many markets that we've laid out in the market segmentation, and now choosing one of them that we're going to focus on. And why do we do this? Because as an entrepreneur, we have limited resources, and we have to consolidate those resources to take on the great challenges that we have. We have limited amounts of money, we have limited amounts of time, and we have limited amounts of human capital. So we need to take that and we need to apply it in a very focused way. So how do we do this is the question. So market segmentation we started with many of them, we brainstormed, we brought it down to a few, 6 to 8. But now how are we going to choose the one market that we're going to go after? Well, the one market that we're going to go after is not going to be the biggest market, most likely. It's going to be the market that's going to be the easiest for us to capture. And not only just the easiest enough to capture, it's going to be big enough such that we will have enough cash flow and built up enough critical mass that we will then be able to move on from there. Think about the term beachhead market. In a military operation, what you're trying to do is you're trying to land on a beach and then secure that beach, but then that beach is strategic because then you're going to expand out from there. So it's got to be big enough so that we can land our boats on it. It's got to be sufficient that we can start to build up enough people on the ground, and then it's got to be such that we can then conquer additional territories from there. So we don't want it to be the biggest possible market. We want it to be the lowest hanging fruit that we can get, but it's fruit that's big enough that will allow us to get to be cash flow positive and then position us to win additional markets. That's what the definition of a beachhead market is, why we do it, and generally how we're going to go about doing it. With regard to market segmentation, let me give you a very concrete example. One of the companies that I started with Thomas Massey, it was actually his technology. It started about sensible devices, then we created sensible technologies, was a revolutionary 3D interface into the computer. Basically, it was a robot that allowed you to feel things in the computer. It was like a 3D mouse next to it, but I could feel it. As I moved in here, I could feel what I saw, and I could lift it up and down, I could twist it around, I could move it. Extraordinary technology, and I could actually deform what I saw there. So for the first time, people could see things in the computer, they could hear things in the computer, but for the first time they could touch it as well. Extraordinary breakthrough. It allowed all types of things to happen. You could now play games, that we could feel things, you could do medical simulations, you could interact with 3D objects in ways that people couldn't have imagined before. Blind people could now use it. It was a target-rich environment of things that we could do. And we made a list of all the things we could do. It was extraordinarily long. Crazy ideas. Ideas that were inappropriate. But we had to come up with a way to move forward that was aligned with our passions and our values. So what we did is we made a matrix that listed at the very top, the top markets that we were going to be involved with. And for instance, one of them was an animator. That was the customer. So in this, it was the industry was the entertainment industry. And I apologize for this being too small, but we'll put online an example of this matrix because it's going to be very detailed. But while the industry entertainment was relevant, what was much more relevant was who was the end user. Who was the end user? And in this case, the end user was an animator, be it at Pixar, be it Industrial Light and Magic, be it at Disney. All these people had a real need to move three-dimensional objects around, and we decided not to focus on the 2D, but strictly the 3D. So within that, we had to say, that's the end user. What exactly are they doing? And in 3 dimensions, what they were doing was, what was the application that they were doing? And the application was they were sculpting, they were painting, and there might be some dynamics. So you've seen 3D movies, so they have to create the shapes, they have to sculpt them, they then paint them to be a certain color, and they paint them in 3 dimensions, and then they move them around. And so all of these things were things that animators were doing in a very non-intuitive way, but as soon as they could have our 3D device, they could do that. And so as we go down to what we were going to use it for, now we could have the specific benefits that they were going to achieve from this as well. And we gave a detailed description of the benefits that they would get from this. Then we would say, what does the market look like, market characteristics. Then we talk about who are the current players that are out there doing that, so we can see the as-is state, so why we're better. And you can see through this whole matrix that we lay out. We have a whole series of things that we drill down and look at. The example that you're going to see is one that worked well for us, but yours might be different. But these types of things are what you're going to see. So, but as we laid it out, we had entertainment, we had the industrial designer. Design. I apologize for the hard to read writing here. And so you can see what they were doing as well. Industrial design, you would have medical visualization. Companies like GE had 3D data sets that they were getting through CAT scans, MRI, and they wanted to look at them, interact with those data sets. We had surgical simulation. We also had computing for the blind, human-computer interface for non-visual human-computer interface. And for each one of these, we had molecular modeling, and you go, assembly path planning, and we even had seismic, analyzing seismic data. All of these different ones we laid out, and then we dug down in here for a matter of a week or two to understand what each of them were. And then at that point we had a nice market segmentation that we could then take a step back and take a look at and say, wow, those are the top opportunities. Which one should we go after? This takes a lot of work. But the work that we're going to put in up front is going to pay dividends, because our team will now have had a chance to look at all the different opportunities, and when we choose one, we're going to have the highest level of confidence possible. So that is market segmentation, with a very specific, real example at Sensible Technologies, which ended up working out quite well for us.